My name is Kevin Larrabee. I'm the head coach and owner here at Allied Strength in Gloucester, Massachusetts. Today we're going to be going through a sports nutrition talk that I've given to athletes, parents, and coaches to help athletes prepare for their practices and games, to make sure that they perform at their best, and to make sure that they're properly recovering, getting ready for that next practice, that next game, that next training session. This is a free talk, and there are more talks like this on AlliedStrength.com talking about injury prevention and proper warm-ups. So if you're interested and you want to get some more information, go to AlliedStrength.com. We have more video content and programs on there that you can view. So as we go through today, this is my gym, by the way. You're kind of seeing a side view, but this is kind of our gym here at Allied Strength, where we do adult group training, sports performance training, and personal training. But I want to start with this question. What do you think of when you hear the phrase nutrition or sports nutrition? Because it's really tough. People are getting thrown lots of really conflicting information these days, whether it be adults with their nutrition being kind of sold diets, and athletes are seeing this stuff too, by the way, which is really important. Like when athletes are seeing like low carb diets, when they're thinking about losing weight to prepare for a season or something like that, that can be very detrimental. So we need to be cognizant of that as well. But this is a question that I always pose to those athletes, parents, and coaches. What do you think of? And a lot of the responses that I get are usually like Gatorade or usually like protein. Usually it is something like water, like protein shakes. Like they think of that as like sports nutrition, which that's definitely a component of it. But I think that's really important to get that conversation started. What do you think of when you hear those words? Because we're going to try to add some more context to that today. So we're going to focus on easy and effective solutions. Kind of this particular version of the talk was made for some soccer players. So whenever I give this talk, I try to also use that word context again. It's really important in this field for soccer players, but a lot of what we're going to talk about today, it's exactly the same for football players, for basketball players, for lacrosse, field hockey, track athletes, for athletics in general. A lot of this information, like 95% of it's going to be the same. There's going to be some other sports that are going to have more specific requirements and stresses that we would need to adjust for, but for the most part, that's all going to be the same. So again, easy and effective solutions today. We're going to talk about hydration. We're going to talk about breakfast. We're going to talk about pre and post event nutrition. So the event means practice or for games or for, again, use that track athlete. They might be going to a meet. And those meets are one of those kind of like 5% things that is very different, because they're like competing for, kind of 4 hours, and it's like split up and stuff. Track is a very interesting sport for that. We're going to keep you guys moving here, though, because we get a lot to talk about. So again, in that context of soccer, like this is how I like to present it, because it helps it make more sense. For that sport, these are the demands that you have. It's a burst sport, but that's really all sports. Like whether you're thinking basketball, there are most of these sports, like let's just go through soccer, basketball, even hockey, football. These are all sports where there is some steady state work that's being done. Then there's quick bursts where these athletes need to get to the ball, or they need to get into a position, or they need to react to a defender. So that's what we call like a burst sport. And those are really demanding sports, because they're also usually paired up with having to still have lots of endurance, but then have that capability of moving quickly. So lots of abrupt stops and changes in direction. This is really important, especially when it comes to the end of matches and the games and a competition. When fatigue sets in, that's when we have that higher likelihood of injuries. And this is where nutrition can play a really important role, because if you don't necessarily have the energy to finish at the end of a game, that's when you're going to increase that likelihood of getting hurt, those non-contact injuries that we do everything in our power to try to prevent. It's physical sport. Most sports are. So how far do you want to go? This is the question I like to ask the athletes. Like, Some athletes that I talk to, they're just playing the sport. It's fun. That's awesome. I love that because sports should be like kind of the number one goal. I'm playing this sport because it's fun to play. But for those athletes that want to be the captain, that want to go from being a bench player to a role player, or a role player to being a starter, these are the questions to ask. How far do you want to go? How much are you willing to dedicate yourself? Are you willing to wake up 10 minutes earlier in the morning to have breakfast to make sure that you're properly fueling yourself for the day ahead, for the practice, for the game? How far do you want to go? And I like to use this analogy. So when we think of strength and conditioning in this gym, we're building really strong engines, getting those muscles stronger so you can exert more force into the ground, or to, if you're a football player, to be able to tackle someone, or to be able to stay upright and not get knocked around too easily. That's building the engine. But none of that matters unless we properly fuel that vehicle. Your body is the vehicle. So we need to make sure that we're properly fueling ourselves. Otherwise, none of that stuff matters. Or you could have that really great engine, but then you can run out of gas halfway through a game, and then games are won at the end. They're won in the fourth quarter. They're won in overtime. That's what separates champions from the folks that are the runners-up. So let's start with hydration. This is, you're going to think, what are you talking about, hydration? That's so simple, just drink water. Yeah, it is, but I don't know if you are a high school or middle school or collegiate athlete, from working with lots of athletes, this is usually one of the first things I need to address because of it being kind of the first problem. Athletes aren't drinking enough. You got to keep in mind that you're about 60% water, and that's also talking about these organs like your brain, which is like 75% water. If you're dehydrated, do you think it's going to affect yourself? Affect your cognitive ability, your ability to make decisions on the fly? Of course, right? So we need to remember that. So again, for someone that's 120 pounds, again, we were talking with some high school soccer players, 72 pounds of you is water. That's a lot. And again, muscle and brain tissue, there's 75% water. So what are the two systems that are going to be most affected by dehydration? Your muscular system and your cognitive ability. So thirst, what can affect thirst? Thirst is one of those things we have as a survival mechanism. If we didn't have that thirst effect, we would just become dehydrated and we would all die. So evolution kind of helped us out by giving us this thirst effect. It can be affected by weather. So if it's really hot out, it can increase that thirst effect. But conversely, if it's cold out, then you might not get that thirst effect as quickly. So for sports where you're playing outdoors, you might actually run into problems where that thirst effect is not kicking in, like football players towards the end of the season when it's starting to get cooler. If you live in an area like we're here in Massachusetts, where it can get pretty cold in November, even October. Same thing for soccer players, baseball players in the early parts of the season, softball players, where it can still be pretty cold in March. So weather can play an effect. We got to remember that we have a delayed thirst response. So your body, it's kind of like that same idea. We use this kind of connection where you've probably heard, like when you're eating food, when you're having a big meal, you actually have a delayed response back up, from your stomach saying like, hey, I'm full. You don't need to eat anymore. I'm kind of stretching out a little bit. That response is delayed. The thirst response is very much the same. So we got to keep that in mind. What that means is really we got to start getting ahead of the hydration game before that thirst response potentially kicks in. Fullness. So if you're like really full, if you just had a really big meal, you're probably not going to be running to drink a bunch of water too, because your stomach's already full. So that can inhibit that thirst response. Salty foods. If you have like potato chips or beef jerky or something like that, that can increase the thirst response. Caffeine, same thing. You're tending to, actually increase that thirst response when you're drinking lots of caffeine. But it's kind of one of those weird things where also if you're drinking a caffeinated beverage, it can kind of get confusing for your body because you're starting to expel more fluids because of that caffeine, but you're also drinking something with caffeine. So it's goes both ways. So signs of dehydration. This is really important for, again, talking to three groups right now: athletes, parents, and coaches. Primarily, coaches need to be very aware of this as well, because you have to be able to recognize when an athlete is starting to get dehydrated so there can be an intervention there. Athletes too, this is your responsibility. It's not just on the coach or the parent to see, oh man, my athlete or my son or daughter is dehydrated. I need to go make sure that they're drinking some water. So signs of dehydration: muscle fatigue, muscle spasms and cramps is probably the one that we, react to the most. When we start cramping up, we know we might be a little bit dehydrated. Mental fatigue, we talked about the cognitive issues with dehydration. Headache, dizziness, rapid heart rate. So these are all signs of dehydration, including nausea. So, nausea is again a problem with dehydration, because usually when you're nauseous, it's hard to drink water. It's tough to kind of get back to that equilibrium. So this is the chart that I put up in, it's literally right over there in relation to the camera right now, but in the gym, we put it on the front of the bathroom door, and I put it right above the toilet, because your urine is your best gauge for current hydration. Taking a look at the color of that urine. So this is really simple. Like if you're anything darker than a light tint of yellow, you need to continue drinking. You got to continue to hydrate. If you're in the clear, you're in the clear. Like that's an easy way to think about it. But if you're anything darker than that, you need to rehydrate. That could be very dangerous, and especially it's a sign that you'll see at the end of a practice or a game, especially in those hotter climates. You're going to go to the bathroom and you're going to see that you're really dehydrated. It's a good reminder, hey, we need to start that rehydration process, because that's going to have a significant effect on our recovery for the next practice and for the next game. So this is our daily hydration guide. Roughly about 6 liters a day. That's 1.5 gallons. This is for athletes, right? So this is for athletes that are active. And if you think about it, it's not a ton of water. But if we're talking about game days, and some other factors can affect this, like weather and stuff like that. But this is a pretty good guideline. This will get you pretty close to that clear urine color when you're going to the bathroom. But 6 liters a day for high intensity athletic events. And I like to kind of give my athletes the guide of like a half liter when you wake up in the morning. Like that should be part of your breakfast, should be part of your morning ritual, because I'm telling you, you would be amazed if you actually ask and you monitor this. But how many athletes wake up, they get ready for school, they go to school, they go to their first class, and they haven't drank anything yet in that day. Sometimes it might just be like coffee, which isn't going to be the perfect thing for rehydration, because after you sleep for hopefully 7 or 8 hours, you're in a dehydrated state. You haven't drank for a while, so we need to start that rehydration process early. And then half a liter 30 minutes before games or practices, half a liter during. That's kind of a minimum, but it can change based on how much you're playing, based again on weather, the climate and stuff like that, if it's humid out. Half a liter within 30 minutes after the game or after the practice, because again, starting that rehydration process for recovery. And half a liter just like every 90 minutes. So like I use these it's probably a really common thing no matter where you're watching this, but those half liter bottles of water. Obviously these days probably not best to use plastic bottles for water, just for trying to be environmentally responsible. But I love these Hydro Flasks too, because what these allow are really like these vacuum insulated water bottles, because it allows you to keep cold water cold. And that makes it a lot more appealing for someone to drink, because how many folks out there, if you're watching this, are you someone that is always craving room temperature water? Probably not. So sports drinks, we mentioned Gatorade before, but this is like the secret best thing out there, G2 for athletes. Not I'm sponsored by Gatorade or anything, but it's really interesting because this is what we would actually make for athletes in college. This is what we would recommend for our athletes, because that is watered down Gatorade. What happens with Gatorade sometimes is when people drink it, it makes them sick to their stomach, regular Gatorade. So we could actually thin it out by kind of doing 1 part Gatorade, 1 part water, or also sometimes 2 parts water, 1 part Gatorade. So basically watered down Gatorade, and this actually works out really well. It's also a lower calorie alternative, and that's less for like a body composition thing. It's more just making sure that an athlete doesn't get over full and get sick to their stomach, because the last thing you want them to do is get out in the field or on the court and then be throwing up like purple Gatorade. That can be kind of scary. So talked about hydration. Let's talk about breakfast. So, these are just some like common things that popped up when I Googled breakfast. These are some breakfast options. You got some eggs, got some oatmeal, like an omelet. I think that's some like salmon or something like that. Some very fancy stuff. Breakfast does not need to be this fancy for middle school, high school, and college athletes, but they got to have something. We also got to remember something is always going to be better than nothing. To the point where, hey, you haven't been eating breakfast. Do you like Pop-Tarts? Hey, why don't you just have like a Pop-Tart? Like for real, like that. You're gonna listen to this and be like, this guy is telling me to have a Pop-Tart for breakfast, telling our athletes to have Pop-Tarts. It's not great, but it's better than nothing. And it gets the ball rolling towards a better breakfast, right? You go from like a Pop-Tart to a toaster strudel. Takes a little bit more time and effort, right? And then you can build that into, heck, I don't know, maybe we could have some, chocolate milk or some core power, or some oatmeal, maybe something progressively better with our breakfast options. But that's what it usually looks like for those athletes. Pop-Tarts, Eggo waffles, cereal, and actually, you would be surprised, but that is sometimes for lots of professional athletes as well. This could be what their breakfast looks like, but we try to make it a little bit better. And again, something is better than nothing. So that was the joke, or it's nothing. But sorry, but before breakfast, let's talk about protein, because whenever we talk about nutrition, one of the most important things for those athletes is protein. So we kind of have three macronutrients. We have protein, we have carbohydrates, and we have fats, right? So we always want a combination of the three, but what tends to be the least ingested, especially for that younger population, is protein. It's actually, to be honest, a challenge that I have sometimes with my adult groups and adult clients is just getting in enough protein and not knowing how much protein is enough. So we'll talk about that. But protein is essential for muscle tissue fuel and growth, efficiency and performance, for recovery, because you got to keep in mind, whether we're doing strength training in here, whether we're out in the field, on the court, on the ice, we're basically damaging that muscle tissue. We're asking a lot from it. We're damaging it, and then it has to repair. That repair actually allows us to get stronger, to get better, to literally build thicker, stronger muscle fibers as we go. And protein is a major component of that. With a lack of protein, you're not going to be able to recover as quickly or as efficiently as you would otherwise. So daily protein needs for athletes. And this is True Team Naturals. This is the protein that I have athletes try out here. I have a bunch of samples because I think samples are important to get people to buy into this stuff. But True Team Naturals, it's all from grass-fed cows, and it is a combination of egg, protein, casein, and whey. So it's a good blend of digestible proteins, and also there's no garbage in it. There's only like 8 ingredients on it, which is really impressive. You really want to try not to cheap out on protein because one, the quality does matter. You want to go with more reputable brands because the stuff isn't always well regulated. Also, it needs to taste good because if it doesn't taste good, the athletes aren't going to consume it anyways. So athlete needs, and you can kind of go back, you can kind of debate this stuff a little bit, but 0.7 to 1 gram per pound of body weight. So for a 130 pound person, that's going to be 91 to 130 grams per day. Not a lot. Like if you take 2 scoops of that protein powder and 16 ounces of water, that's 48 grams of protein. If you had one of those every day and then you just had regular meals, you would hit that number. The problem that we see, and what we'll talk about in a couple minutes, is that a lot of times the athletes' pregame meals are more like gummy bears. They're more chocolate chip cookies, things that aren't necessarily high in protein. Again, we mentioned quality. High protein whole food sources are also perfect. I recommend the protein powder for convenience above all else. So for our high protein whole food sources, chicken meat, fish, eggs, dairy products like Greek yogurt and cheeses, things like that. High quality protein powders and bars are great. Again, protein bars can be good, but I'll mention it later as well. But watch out for things where their number one protein source or the only protein source is soy protein. That's kind of a garbage protein. It's not necessarily because we don't want people to eat like vegetarian or anything like that. There's really good protein blends for vegans and vegetarians, but soy protein is the cheapest available protein out there, and it is also the least efficient, and it doesn't digest very well. It's not really biologically available when you're consuming it. So I try to keep people away from that. So things like Cliff Bars, that's the reason why they're so inexpensive. It's because they have low quality protein in them. And look for banned substance free. This is especially for high school and collegiate athletes. If you go down to the local GNC and you just get like crazy muscle builder stuff, again, regulation isn't incredibly strict on this. Look for reputable brands, look for banned substance free, because you've got to remember, for those athletes that are going to play in college, they will be drug tested based on their level, and it's just better to be safe. You don't want to be consuming garbage. Again, for vegans, complete proteins, there are plenty of companies out there that make vegan protein blends. So with proteins like whey protein, those are complete proteins. They have a complete amino acid profile without getting crazy in depth onto that. But with a lot of plant-based protein sources, they don't have complete amino acid profiles. So what folks will do to create a complete protein is have a couple different types like pea protein and hemp protein, rice protein, put those together, and that will get a complete amino acid profile, so you can have that complete protein. So that's another good point, making sure if you're gonna get a vegan protein, make sure it's not just like a rice protein or a pea protein. It actually has a combination of a bunch in there. And I mentioned that avoid soy protein. So for breakfast goals, this is actually, my phone's probably worse than this now, but this is my daily alarm. Like some days I need to be up at 4:45 to make sure I can properly prepare for my day. I know a lot of athletes are going to start around 7:30, maybe 8 o'clock for school, and athletes will always tell me, "Oh no, I need to sleep. Like I need to get that sleep." And sleep is very important. It's incredibly important for recovery. But all I really need is 5 minutes for breakfast. If you can just take like even that 5:15 wake up time, or maybe you're probably waking up closer to 6:15. If you just change that to 6 a.m., you'd have plenty of time for getting a great breakfast in before you go to school. So it's not that you don't have the time, it's that you need to properly organize your alarm schedule to make sure that you give yourself the time to do this stuff. So breakfast goals. One, we're gonna hydrate. We talked about that 500 or half liter of water, 2 cups of water. We're gonna get in some high quality carbohydrates, fat, and protein. We're gonna continue the recovery process from the previous day. That was that rehydration and properly eating the day before. prepare your body to perform at its best for the day. Those are our 4 goals. And again, something will always be better than nothing. Now, before we go into some of those options, multivitamins are really fantastic, and it's so easy today. Like, we used to have there's still Flintstones vitamins, but that's what we used to have as kids growing up. And they basically tasted like candy to the point where some of us would eat like a handful of them. I'm sure none of you guys did that. But today, for, again, athletes, a multivitamin is one of the easiest ways to cover your bases. So again, I was talking with some female soccer players for this specific version of the talk, but look at, you have literally like women's gummy multivitamins. Like, this is so easy to do. You can have literally gummy bears with your breakfast, and you will get your, a good vitamin profile in the morning. Like, it's so easy to do. You just got to do it. You got to go down to the CVS, to the Target, to your grocery store, and buy this stuff. And one a day, I've kind of found to be the best, because I actually make specific versions for teenagers as well, for things that they are in more need of, just like they would make like an over 50 version for a multivitamin too. So if you got 1 to 5 minutes, here are some super easy and good options. We're going to talk about some great options as well. We're going to start with our water. We're going to have a 12 to 16 ounces of Fairlife Extra Protein chocolate milk. That's this stuff right here. They sell it in grocery stores. You can get a huge jug. You can get these smaller versions of them, so you can just grab like a bottle and drink it. And that's going to give you about 20 grams of protein. Not a ton, but hey, it's better than not having breakfast. It's better than regular chocolate milk, but if I had someone who said, well, we have chocolate milk, I'd say, okay, drink a big glass of chocolate milk. Again, better than nothing before you walk out the door to school. 1 to 2 cups of cereal or oatmeal with fruit and that Fairlife milk. So that's getting us a lot of carbohydrates, but we want to make sure that we're still getting some fat and some protein from the milk. 2 pieces of toast or English muffin with almond, cashew, or peanut butter. Awesome. We're going to get a little bit of protein from that nut source, but we got to keep in mind, nuts are not a source of protein. They're a source of fats. They have some protein in them, but if you think about like 2 tablespoons of peanut butter, it might have like 4 or 5 grams of protein in it, which is really not a lot. Protein bar, RX bar. RX bars are sold all over the place now. Like, to be honest, I would have an athlete grab 2 of those, eat 2 of those for breakfast. That's going to give you about 400 calories, which isn't a lot. It's going to give you about 24 grams of protein. It's going to give you some fat. It's going to get you going for the day. Low-fat yogurt, just regular low-fat yogurt with fruit, that would be a great alternative too. All can be made better with a better protein source though. But these are good options. This is where we need to start. This is the huge jump up from Pop-Tarts. We went from Pop-Tarts to this. This would be great. And it literally takes, a lot of this stuff takes 1 minute. Like, how long does it take you to drink some chocolate milk? Not that long. Probably the longest thing is having to put your English muffin or the bread in the toaster to make those. That's probably what will take the most time. So here are some great options. That same 1 to 2 glasses of water, we could have a protein shake with 1 to 2 scoops of protein. That will get us 25 to 50 grams of protein, plus a piece of fruit, some mixed nuts, some almonds, getting our protein, our carbohydrates from that piece of fruit, fat from the nut source, okay? We can use Core Power, Pure Power pre-made shakes. Like these pure protein shakes, you can get them on Amazon. You can buy them at like CVS, the grocery store. It's a 12-ounce can and it packs 35 grams of protein in it. And you can just keep them in the fridge, pull it out, shake it up, pop it open, you drink it, and that's it. That's literally all you need to do, and they're pretty inexpensive. 2 Greek yogurts with fruit in it. That will get you, again, probably about 25 grams of protein, and that's going to run you about 250 calories. Not that we're always thinking about calories, but I know some athletes are going to be looking at calorie counts. It's not necessarily the goal for this stuff right now. 1 to 2 cups of cottage cheese with fruit. I have some athletes that really love that. I'm not a big cottage cheese fan. I'm not a cottage guy for the It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia fans out there, but It's a good source. And again, these core power shakes, they're sold like at your grocery store. You can order them online at Amazon or Target and just get them shipped to your house. And not much effort, really not much effort. 1 to 5 minutes. Great options. Smoothies, this is probably taking it to the next level. Getting some Greek yogurt, throwing in some frozen berries, maybe some protein powder in there, some spinach, some kale. That would be like the superstar breakfast. Okay, and again, it probably only takes like 5 minutes to do. I do this like almost every day. It takes 5 minutes. You put the stuff in there, you turn it on, you pour it out, and then you literally rinse the blender. So 5 to 15 minutes. This is for the ones that want to get up a little bit earlier, or for the weekends. You can get an omelet. You can have some scrambled eggs, some protein protein pancakes. Lots of great recipes available online. Greek yogurt, and then add in some toast with peanut butter or almond butter. Have a protein shake along with that if you want to. Make sure you're really covering your bases. Doesn't take a lot of time. That's a really good breakfast. So again, this was mentioned a couple times, talking with soccer players, but you're going to have similar quotes like this for any successful athlete about what athletes have before practice, before games. If it's before a game, I go out on breakfast, eggs, a smoothie, potato hash, and bacon. Look at that. Protein, getting some carbohydrates, getting some fats. Then my meals get smaller throughout the day, and post-game, I refuel with water and chocolate milk. Pretty easy, huh? Really effective for a national soccer player from the U.S. women's national soccer team, because it's got protein and carbs. Smart. She knows what she's doing. She's very successful. So pre-event, pre-practice nutrition solutions. So these are more kind of snack type things, especially for when you're traveling right after school. A lot of athletes go right from school, right to practice, right to their games to get right on the bus. So this would be like 60 to 90 minutes before a game. It can depend, though, based on how an athlete digests. Some athletes could literally, have a peanut butter and jelly sandwich like 2 minutes before walking on the field and be fine. Some might need a little bit more time to digest. You have to always kind of go with what works best for you or for that athlete. So again, our half a liter of water, protein, carbohydrates, fats. Can change based on personal digestion, which I just mentioned. So what does it usually look like? It usually looks like candy, chocolate, gummy bears, cookies, like this type of stuff. Whoops. Like that's not, you think that's going to help you perform? Probably not. But there are some other better solutions. So good solutions, granola bars, Lara bars. Again, try to avoid Clif bars for the soy protein. String cheese, beef jerky. Fruit that you don't need to really prepare. Apples, oranges, pears, bananas. Like this stuff is pretty easy to bring with you, to keep with you in school if you need to like keep it in your backpack before you go to your game or your gym bag. Like that stuff's pretty simple to do. Again, you could use a protein shake in a piece of fruit with that as well. That would be a great way to prepare, and it's actually pretty light. You're not having to really fill up your stomach. Great snacks. Again, peanut butter and jelly with banana. That's a really good option. It's kind of tried and tested, like literally used with lots of NBA players, like before practice, before games, especially when traveling, because it's really easy to do. Sandwiches with deli meats, Greek yogurts with fruit. We talked about that for breakfast. Only problem is sometimes it needs to be cooled, right? RX bars, protein shakes, core power shakes, again, are great alternatives. Those are 26 grams of protein and about 26 grams of carbohydrates. You have like a 1-to-1 carbohydrate protein ratio, which is really good. Fruit team with protein. So again, snacks to keep in your bag. So it's not just about making sure you're fueled right before practices and before games, but also throughout the school day, because if some athletes that will go to school without eating breakfast, they might have lunch, and then they might eat like something really quick before going to practices or games. So it's good to have some snacks available, whether it's protein bars, RX bars, mixed nuts. You can even get go to Trader Joe's, get mixed nuts in like pre-sealed bags, or just use a Ziploc bag, something like that. String cheese, sandwiches, fruit. Like that's all stuff that is, one, not too hard to prepare, but also they stay really well. So you can just throw them in your locker, your gym bag, whatever. So as we wrap up, hydration. 6 liters of water a day. Get a great water bottle. Vacuum insulated water bottles are great. Keeps things cool, especially in those hot parts of the year. Breakfast, eat something. Something's always going to be better than nothing, but preferably better than what a 5-year-old would eat. So try to stay away from the Fruit Loops. I'm a big Cinnamon Toast Crunch fan, but it would not be the optimal breakfast for me as an athlete. Pre-game, pre-practice snacks to fuel performance. Prepare for this stuff. Get ready to go, because you got to understand that if you're not willing to put in this work and this preparation, I promise you, your competitors are. And this can be a huge difference between winning and losing. Being really great at the start of the game or finishing strong at the end of a game. You got to be able to finish strong. Keep it simple. Improve quality of the spirit snacks is what the soccer team was using. But a lot of teams will do these like pre-game meals and snacks that they'll share. Make sure that those are better. So that's it. Like I mentioned before, we have some other talks on AlliedStrength.com, some other education components that you guys can just check out for free on warm-ups, to properly warm up, to perform at your best, to perform effectively, and to reduce the risk of injury. And also we talk about strength training and injury prevention stuff on there as well to help athletes get prepared for the rigors of their sport. If you do have any questions, Kevin@AlliedStrength.com is how you can reach me. If you're in the Cape Ann area and you're looking for strength training or personal training or adult group training, we're here for you. Again, you can reach out to me through email or give us a call here at the gym. But thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you hanging out. Hopefully this was very useful for you as a parent, athlete, or coach. And again, thank you so much. If you have any questions, let me know. Take care.